Hello, Lulu, and welcome back to the More Money Podcast. This is your host, Jessica Morehouse, and this is episode 341 of the show. And oh boy, do I have an amazing guest on the show, but also a really interesting topic. I say this sometimes, but it's true. I don't think I've really approached this topic too much, and that's why I wanted to have her on the show. I was looking for guests, and I stumbled upon her book called Dump Your Degree, and I'm like, I need to have this fabulous woman on my show to discuss why you should dump your degree or why you maybe shouldn't go to university. And now obviously it's too late for some of us, myself, and because I'm old and have been to university, but a lot of us are having kids and setting up RESPs and assuming that our kids are going to go to university or college. But what if that's not the path for them? And what if that's not even the right path anymore? Things have changed so much, and we dive into a lot of that in this episode. So I am so excited to have Dr. Zakiya Akerele on the show. She is an Atlanta-based educator, author, and speaker who found an early passion in academic pursuits, hoping to use them to improve herself and also the world around her. And she's received her Ph.D. at Fordham University and has served in various capacities at higher education institutions at social justice, political, and NGO, non-governmental organizations, both in the U.S. and abroad. And her new book called Dump Your Degree is a very timely and invaluable resource for anyone seeking guidance on navigating higher education, developing their career, and also having financial security. And you're just going to love this episode. I think it's brilliant that she's writing a book called Dump Your Degree about some of the downsides of getting higher education, and yet she has a PhD. But it makes sense because she's been through it. She has the experience, and she also works with students. And so I think you're going to love this episode. You're going to learn quite a bit. So before I get to that interview with Zakiya, here's just a few words about this season's podcast sponsor. This episode of the More Money Podcast is supported by Desjardins. Does your financial institution share your values? Because Desjardins is about more than just money. They are on a mission to enrich people's lives and improve the economic and social well-being of Canadians everywhere. Desjardins' main goal as a cooperative is to support its members and make a positive impact on their communities by providing exceptional customer care, offering a variety of financial services, and above all, listening to its members. They've also been at the forefront of sustainable investing as one of the first financial institutions to offer responsible investment portfolios. To learn more about Desjardins and how they're a cooperative making a difference, visit desjardins.com. Welcome, Zakiya, to the More Money Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited as well.
Well, yeah, you have, when I saw kind of your name kind of put forth to be on my show, and then I saw the name of your book, I'm like, oh, I need to have her on my show, because I've never seen a book, your book is called Dump Your Degree, How to Repurpose Your Education, Control Your Career, and Gain Financial Freedom. You have a PhD. You've been to school many a time, and yet you're telling people to kind of not maybe go down that path, which is so interesting, but also I feel like very relevant to what we're seeing with education these days, and also very relevant to, I'm a millennial, I'm in my mid-30s, and this was something that took me pretty much a decade to kind of maneuver and navigate, because everything that you speak to in your book, I'm like, that's exactly what I experienced. And it took me a long time to figure out, am I doing this right or doing it wrong? Because I think a lot of us, I was always that person that would like to draw within the lines, always very straight and narrow, following the advice of my elders, because I thought that was what smart people did, and smart people went to school and all that kind of stuff. And then my experience after getting my education and my degree was not what I was promised. And I think there's a lot of millennials and probably Gen Zs as well that are very disillusioned. So we've got a lot of good things to talk about. But first, I want to start with, you are an educator. You have multiple degrees. Why did you want to write this book? Or tell me a little bit about, I guess, your background and experience that led you to this point where you're like, I need to write this book for, future generations.
Yes. So I'm a millennial as well, probably on the older tip, entering in. But a millennial nonetheless. And I was given the advice as well, go to school. I myself am a third generation educator. So going to get into higher education, getting degrees, that's nothing new for me or, from my family, right? That was the kind of the blueprint. But unfortunately, my experiences were very different from those who came before me. One, they didn't have to take out student loans, and if they did, they didn't take them out at the level I had to, right? Because college tuition was significantly less than it is now. Also, the advice of just get a degree, there was not really a structuring of like looking at the cost and the benefits of particular degrees. The focus was just on higher education, but not like weighing everything. So that my experience led me to get degrees, particularly in areas that were not in high demand, that did not pay well. My goal was to ultimately become a professor. After having changed my mind to become an attorney, took the LSATs. Those didn't go as expected, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? But I realized that I had a passion for what I was learning in philosophy and religion, and like learning about different religions and cultures and all that type of stuff. But that's not in high demand. So I was like, okay, I really want to be a professor. So I thought, okay, I'll go get a master's. Got a master's in that, took some time off, worked. I've always worked, whether not as much in undergrad, but somewhat in undergrad, but throughout my graduate experiences, I always worked. So even when I took a break, got a second master's, this time in international education, and then going on to get my doctorate, when I got out into the job market in around 2010, after having completed my doctorate, we were just coming out of a recession. So not only was it just like not a lot of jobs available, but particularly in the areas that I wanted to get into. So that was a complete shock, having always had the availability to work, whether it was as a researcher or doing conflict resolution with interfaith groups or doing all these things. Those jobs were just few and far between. So I was like, I don't know what to do. I was living in New York City, so that was like, another added expense. I couldn't really chill and relax. So I ended up going back home. I was raised in Florida, and I was like, okay, no, I cannot do this because I've been out of the house since I was 17, away to college. Now having to come back 10 years later and like start all over again. Like, what am I doing? How am I going to, get into a career? I was really stuck, and it took a toll on me personally, professionally. So what I said was, look, I'm going to have to figure out a way, an unconventional way to approach this job search, to approach the job market, and not just, submit an application and hope that you're the best candidate. That's just not going to work. So I figured out ways to set myself apart. I ended up getting roles in industries that paid well, that were not directly in line with my degrees, but that I had the skill set for. And so that like put a light bulb off in my head, and I was like, okay, I can do this in other ways or help others. I did eventually, 3 years after that, get my dream job as a professor. And so I was, steady, employment, stable, content with the work I was doing. But what triggered this book was seeing my students go on to now experience the same challenges I once had. They were graduating and not finding work. And I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So even though most of my students took my courses because they were taking it for electives in the humanities and things like that, I still set some time aside to help them to plan for their career while they were still in school, no matter what their major was. So that's kind of like how the ball started rolling. And I said, okay, look, you can't just think that the degree is going to open the door. It takes a lot more than that. It's about who you know. It's about the things you know as far as skills, the talents you have, marketing yourself. It's a whole thing that goes into having a successful career. And it's not just, oh, I've graduated, now let me apply for jobs and they'll just come, rolling in. That's not how it works. So that's how Dump Your Degree started.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, one part of your book that really stuck with me was when you were on a panel, you were talking to, I think, a board or another, a bunch of professors. Yeah. And you were trying to kind of get the message across that, hey, we need to do a better job of preparing these, grads for employment. And they were telling you, no, that's not what university is for. It's not to prepare them for employment, is to educate them or to provide them with knowledge. Yes. And that, for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is actually I've heard, when I was in school, that is kind of what I was hearing. But your whole point is, but people go to school to get a job.
Yes.
They don't get to go to school just so they can have more knowledge and then figure out how to get a job.
Right.
I think that was so, and that's I think ultimately the big problem with post-secondary education, or especially like, universities, they don't prepare you for the real world. But they sell the dream though. Because you also mentioned, well, when you look at all of the marketing material, and gosh, whenever I go home to Vancouver, I feel like whenever you're on the SkyTrain, that's all you see is advertisements for going to these different universities and colleges, and how they promote it is this person got a job, XYZ. But then the actual experience is like, no, like I remember so vividly when, because we really didn't talk about like how to get a job. And I mean, you talk about like you have a degree, or you have a chapter in your book saying don't get a BS degree. And I did. I got a film degree, BS. I mean, it was great, but it didn't help me get the job that I'm doing now.
Right.
And I remember having a conversation with one of my professors in my last year being like, oh gosh, I have to think about what's next. And I remember like, I asked him like, how do I get a job? What should we think about next? He's like, have you thought about doing a master's? And I'm like, that is not an answer, right? And I think that's the answers a lot of students are getting, and it's really scary. And I mean, a lot of the things that you point out in your book, that are things that it is kind of like you have to have a side hustle in university, and that means just preparing, getting new skills so you are employable. So it's like you can't just get by doing well in school. And honestly, kind of doing well in school isn't that important. Not one person has ever asked me what my grades were.
Exactly.
So yeah, I want to kind of talk a little bit about some of the, I think, advice that is no longer relevant, that we need to kind of put aside, because it's still happening. These kids are still, Gen Z and even younger, they're still getting this advice from their parents who are, 20, 30 years older than them. And it's not really working anymore. And so what are some of these things that you heard, but also maybe some of the students that you've worked with are still hearing that we need to just ignore completely now?
Well, that basically the degree is what is kind of like that golden ticket to success. It's not. We see a lot of people who become successful without degrees. So it's more so about the skills. You even see a lot of these tech companies and other companies that are saying we don't even require a degree anymore. It's good if you have it, okay, but really we want you to have the skills. And there are even opportunities to solely, specialize in a particular area without a degree, whether it's in tech or any other industry. Like you mentioned, film. There are people who work in film that don't have a degree in it, but they've, gotten some certifications or what have you. So, when you're looking at the type of degree, if you're going into things like medicine, sure, you need a degree, right? Those credentials matter. But if you're more so undecided, more into like the liberal arts or humanities or things like that, I would not recommend someone go and spend all this money to get degrees in those things unless they have a particular career trajectory that would require it. Maybe to ultimately become a professor, you need a Ph.D. in that. But the irony in that is many professors are not making what people think they're making.
Yeah, they're not making 6 or 7 figures.
Oh, no. And then even the majority of colleges, or an overwhelming amount of the colleges and universities, are hiring adjuncts. And adjuncts are not full-time. They're not paid or given any benefits. You're pretty much like a part-time worker. You could last time I checked, you can pretty much work in like fast food and make the same amount as an adjunct. The adjuncts need to work several jobs in order to just make ends meet. So it's like, oh, I have a PhD, I'm teaching, I have this social, this status as a professor, but I'm not making the income that comes along with that title. Because it's cheaper for a lot of universities to just hire adjuncts than to hire people full time and, salaries, benefits, and things like that. And because so many more people are now getting degrees, there is an overabundance of people who are able to teach at the university level. So it's like very competitive. So it even just depends. I say all that to say it even depends on, maybe a job might require a high level of or a certain amount of degrees, but is it worth it even with the salary outcomes? So the earning potential. The outdated information would be to, like I said, it's not just go get a degree, but what the degrees you get are in. And also, I would advise people to go get a mentor before just listening to their parents in the field or the industry that they're interested in getting into, to see what type of advice they could get as far as guiding them to the right path. Not just, oh, I got a degree, I can easily tap into this industry. You need to know from an expert what is required before entering into higher education.
And I think the other thing that, you've probably been seeing too is a lot of people get these degrees and then don't really know actually like the actual industry that they want to enter in, or what the jobs could be. And they realize, actually, I hate it. I know so many people, they're like, I did part of my law degree. And then I realized, like, I have a friend, she did, I think, half of her law degree and realized, actually, I hate this. And then she worked in, law in a different format. We used to work together. And that now she's in fitness and running a successful fitness company. And so sometimes it's like we don't even take the time to realize, do I even want that job before diving into it?
Exactly.
Hence why I'm in finance now.
Yeah. It's interesting. My best friend, he's an attorney, been an attorney for years. He's changing into health and wellness because he's like, this is too stressful. And I was recently on another show, and the host was saying, the type of clients that you could really work well with are lawyers, because he's an attorney himself. And he's like, I know so many people, they went to law school and then they started to practice law and they hated it and they want to pivot their careers. And I never, I didn't know that so many people got into law and just decided, I guess I decided early that this just wasn't for me when I saw those girls at scores.
It saved you probably quite a bit of, yeah, you did dodge a bullet. Yeah. That is so for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, a big mistake a lot of people are doing is getting, and that was the advice I got from my mom, because it's like me and my sisters are the first people in our family to get higher education, to get degrees. And so it was really important for, our family. But we were kind of told, just get any degree, doesn't matter as long as you have it, because that was true back in their day.
Exactly.
And for us, not so true. But besides that, like, let's talk a little bit more about those skills. Like, one thing that was a big, interesting realization over the years is, I thought I did the smart thing getting my degree. And now 10 years later, so my husband, he has a lot of friends who are blue collar workers, electricians and elevator repairmen and people like that. They are very much like, they're doing great.
Oh, yeah.
They're actually doing way better than me and my husband financially, because they didn't spend 4 or 5 years getting a degree and spending all that money. They went right into the workforce, built up those skills, built up their business, started investing in real estate because they had this money to do so, and they're doing just fine. But that was, and you talk about this in your book, which I thought was so interesting. I used to think that if you were a blue collar worker, if you went into the trades or whatever, it wasn't a good path, that you would earn less, that it wasn't a proper career. And so I never even thought about that as an option. And I think a lot of people don't, even though you could actually be making more money and have a better career. Do you want to kind of speak to that? Just getting rid of some of these, I know you talk about in your book, changing your mind about a lot of things.
Yes. I told the story in the book about the plumber friend of mine when we're in school, high school, senior year, about to graduate. Teacher asks all of us, oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And we are all talking about, oh, we're going to college. We're going to become a lawyer, a nurse, a doctor, teacher, what have you. Get to him. He's like, I'm going to just, go and get a plumber certification, trade school. And he's like, stop playing, don't say that. And it was mind-boggling to this teacher that someone, especially in my generation, would say, oh, I just want to be a plumber, because everyone was told you got to go to school. And he didn't believe him until my friend and I, said, hey, no, he's discussed this with us before. We've been encouraging him. He's seen his uncle make a good amount of money being a plumber, having his own business. And so that's what he aspires to do. And unfortunately, we've devalued like the importance or the value of those roles. And not everybody wants to be a white collar worker or,
and we also don't need a million lawyers or doctors or nurses or teachers. Like, we actually need plumbers. Everyone needs a plumber.
Exactly. Everybody. So, and there are many other trade jobs that are even technical related or engineer related that don't require a 4-year degree. They might require a trade school certificate or a community college AA degree, AS degree. that don't require a lot of time, nor do they require the amount of money to be spent to obtain those degrees or certifications, credentials, or what have you. So, it's unfortunate that that outdated information that we're getting, it actually created the overabundance of people getting degrees. Now the degrees are becoming devalued. So it's ironic, they're like, oh no, you better get it because, and then it's like, okay, now there are a million people who have these degrees in one area, one are looking for one job, and they're competing against each other, and they don't have the skills to do something else. So oftentimes people say to me, well, it might have been easier for me, having a PhD to kind of figure out a way to repurpose my education and tap into other industries. And I say to them, actually, it's probably easier for you because one, I had such a tunnel vision thinking, I spent a lot of time wasted thinking I have to go in line with what I have degrees in. Nobody's hiring me. What am I going to do? Whereas someone who doesn't have all of that, to prove or what have you, they just hit the ground running. I've seen so many people who don't have degrees that are millionaires, successful entrepreneurs, because they just knew how to use those skills, whatever they are, in whatever industry, and just hit the ground running. I often encounter people like myself who are just so stuck in, oh, I must, work in this field or this industry because this is what I'm credentialed in, and they don't see outside of the box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was for sure my experience. I always thought that I needed to figure out a way to make film work or work in the arts, some, because I'm like, I don't want, this whole degree to go to waste, but it always didn't feel like it really fit.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, I can do marketing. It's sort of similar. I can kind of get those skills while working. And I did. But then when I, ultimately my heart was like, you should work in personal finance and education because you really love that. It was very hard for me to change my mindset because it is literally the polar opposite of what I did my education in. And also, it's like, well, I'm not good at math and all this kind of stuff. And so it was really hard. But then, then you just do it. I took one course to see if I could pass. I passed. And then you just kind of baby steps a little bit. And there's so many people my age, honestly, I'd say, I don't know many people that I, kind of same age with that we are working in the field that we started in.
Right.
Most people have pivoted and they're doing something completely different. And I feel like a lot of that time we waited until our late 20s, early 30s to make that pivot, which when you think about it, you're like, what a bunch of wasted time when we could have just been like, we should have listened to our instincts earlier and just made those changes earlier. So then we could be on that path earlier. Exactly. But it's hard to make that change, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about, because I know one thing, people listening are like, well, okay, it's either too late for me, I already got the degree, or or I'm doing my degree, maybe I'm near the end of it. I can't, I don't want to dump it. I don't want to stop it. Maybe I want, I've got 1 year left. Let's just finish the thing. You talk a lot about in your book about how important it is to start before you finish your degree and to get those skills while in school. I feel like I tried a little bit to do that, but I feel like a lot of skills I got, like I worked on film sets or I tried to do some video editing. I wish I honestly focused on getting some skills outside of, my degree, like things that were maybe more applicable that would have been a little bit easier for me. And I know you shared some great stories in your book about there's a bunch of students who were in different degrees, maybe liberal arts and stuff like that. And then they kind of created a collective where someone was a barber and offering services to students and someone was cooking meals and selling those and, just kind of dabbling into entrepreneurship. But they actually never thought that, oh, we're honing skills so we can have future careers in these. We're like, oh, we're just having fun and making some extra money. But I'm like, I would have never thought to even really do that, to even set up, because I did have schools and everyone has some sort of skills and someone's probably looking for those skills. So do you want to kind of speak to why it's important to start before you're ready and to dabble in other things outside of maybe your main education?
Right. So to the first question about not dumping it. So the dump your degree is to get your attention. If you don't want to throw it in the trash, that's not what I'm telling you to do. I just want you to not focus so solely on it. Right. Because so many people are like, I have a degree in this, I must work in that. I don't want you to do that because then you'll get stuck in a box and then you won't see the opportunities that are all around you that you might be able to transfer the knowledge even that you acquired from that degree and put it in a different way and make, and make a whole different career out of it. So there's that. Like, don't just drop out. I'm not recommending people just drop out, but if you want to, and that's your, because I've actually met some Gen Zs that I've mentored or connected with. They're like, I just dropped out, and they're doing well.
Okay.
But I get parents that are like, you don't tell people to drop out, and I'm like, I'm not saying that, but whatever.
Yeah.
You choose the path that's best for you. But that being said, starting before you finish, I am so proud. My mom even joked with me about how a few of my mentees, they went on to get jobs or create careers that paid them more than I was making as a professor. My mom was like, how are your mentees making more than you? And I'm like, look, I'm proud of them. Like, even you reminding me of the story that I mentioned about that collective, even one of the guy that was cooking, I saw recently on social media, he updated that he just got a contract in a football stadium. I'm like, he's gone from cooking those. Yeah, he's doing really good, really good. And I'm so proud of them. And so they inspired me while I was teaching them. I literally would go to they rented these apartments, and I would go and say, hey, what are y'all doing? If I needed my computer fixed or some software put on, I would support their business. If I needed my hair done, I'd go up to their little shop, so, and I'm so proud of them. So I say that to say that they're, taking from a page out of their book, starting before you finish, dabbling into things, because it's easier now when you don't have the responsibilities of a family or bills, where you can try out things while you're in college. So, and then you have the support of your peers around you. If you want to sell things or try out products or create an app or what have you, you have a whole community of people on your campus that could be your first, customers or clients, buyers. You can see if you like it now before you graduate and try to start a business, and it might not be the thing that you're interested in. But college is the best time to start and get those skills. Also, it helps you to use those skills in the job market. So if you don't want to become an entrepreneur, but you do want to get into, the job market and secure your dream job, you are developing not only your skills, but your resume, because you can put a lot of these things on your resume to show that you've had certain experiences that would benefit or be an asset to, whatever company you're working for.
Absolutely. And I know another really key thing besides getting these skills, because that's what sets you apart. Everyone has the same degree these days. What's going to set you apart is like those extra kind of things that you can put on your resume. But the other important thing that, again, I feel like we were told about it, but we weren't really, I think, given the tools to actually figure out how to network, to socialize, to meet a mentor, for example. That is the key. I mean, for me, I did a little bit of that. I mean, my one of my professors actually helped me get my first job. It was just a 4-month contract, but it actually was the thing that made me realize I don't think I actually want to work in film.
Right.
But it was a great job at the time. But after that, and then, I just kind of, started tapping some other networks and meet. And I had meetings with people. When I look back, I'm like, wow, it's actually pretty, I actually went out there, and I'm like a super shy introvert most of the time, but I actually went out there because, again, it was like 2009, 2010. It was, you're just grinding. You need to find anything. And so I'm meeting people and having coffee meetings and stuff like that. But I know there were so many things that I probably didn't do that I could do. And now things are so much different now with, access to people online and things like that. So if someone wants to kind of start building that network, even finding a mentor, where should they start?
Well, they should start with who they know. I mean, you never know. I think people overlook. They're like, oh, this is just my family, your cousin could work for or with somebody. You just never know who is who. I remember when I was challenged to find work, I tapped into my family first and then friends, of course, letting them know I'm looking. Or say, for instance, you see positions that you're interested in and thinking about, okay, who do I know that might be connected to that company or that, and reach out to them. A lot of times people say, oh, I want to get it on my own merit. I don't want to listen. The world works about who you know more than what you know. I mean, I'm not saying that, people should just use nepotism or whatever to get in the door. They suck at their job. No, you should have the skills to do the work. But in order to get your foot in the door, tap into your resources. So family, friends. And I also tell people, you just because you're in college and your friend is in college, that doesn't mean that they don't have resources or connections somewhere. They might have a relative themselves that could give you an internship or what have you. So tap into your resources, even your social media network, particularly think places like LinkedIn. Of course, get on LinkedIn. I see a lot of young people who are in like high school, college. They're not on there as much, but I do see it growing. I recently saw a young lady. I don't know who she is, but she's in high school in somewhere in California, and I don't know how her post came through my feed. I guess you know how LinkedIn works, where somebody will like it, you see it, and blah blah blah. So she basically says, "Hey, I'm a high school student. I'm new to LinkedIn," and just saying, you know, she didn't really talk much about like her aspirations for her career, but just letting people know she's new here and she wants to benefit from LinkedIn. I don't know her from anywhere, but I reached out to her. I think she was also saying, okay, if anyone wanted to connect. And I said, hey, if there's any way I could add value to you, let me know. And she's a high school student, right? And I did that because, of course, I have a passion for helping, you know, students be successful in their career. But her just putting herself out there, it attracted people to want to reach out and to help her. So when she's looking for mentorship, she now has a pool to draw from of people to ask or to communicate with. So putting yourself out there on like social media platforms like LinkedIn, and even creating content or marketing yourself in other ways on TikTok, on Instagram, those things could help you because you never know who's watching. Of course, make it meaningful, you know, not just put anything. But those are the ways. But also tapping into your alumni networks, even before you graduate, seeing what alumni are out there on places like LinkedIn or through your school, you know, maybe they have a platform, and seeing what roles they're in and saying, hey, I aspire to be in, you know, this role. You know, I'm finishing up my degree in X, Y, and Z. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions or what have you? Things like that. Just start building those connections and communication long before you graduate, because that will help you in the long run.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I think, you know, kind of sharing a little bit more, because you mentioned LinkedIn and how powerful social media can now be, because it really didn't exist when I was, you know, finished school. And it's such a powerful tool that can be used, you know, for not just, you know, fun or, you know, influencers or whatever. It's like you can find jobs this way. You can find, you know, people who are recruiters this way. And I know you also talk about the book and how to be sought after. And like for me in my business, that's one thing that I learned over the years is like, I see other people get, you know, certain partnerships with brands or speaking gigs. I'm like, how do I get that?
Right.
And sometimes it's literally about setting yourself up so you are findable online, that is very clear who you are, what you do, and why someone would want to partner with you or work with you. And those are very easy things that you can set up yourself, because that's the thing. It's like, I know lots of people, and you mentioned in your book, you knew someone who was like, I'm getting so many recruiters asking me to work for them. I don't even know what to do with all these job offers.
Right.
And then there's people that are like, I wish I had that problem.
Right.
What is one, you know, a couple of things that people can do to set themselves up so they are findable, so that recruiters are like, oh, I want to reach out to that person?
Yeah, so I love how people are creating content on places like YouTube, even like YouTube Shorts now. I love that. Putting yourself out there, having a website, and it's so easy to do these things now, right? You can just build your own website, use one of those platforms, drag and drop, put a portfolio up, depending on your field, right? Put things up on LinkedIn as far as creating posts, content, sharing things that you've created or things you're interested in, questions you may have that will attract people to your page. And, you know, like I mentioned before, TikTok, I've even I've had people reach out to me by finding me on social media. There were things that I didn't even know I was in, like articles. I would check my Instagram and somebody, I just read what you said and, you know, whatever. And I'm like, wow, that's out there. Thanks for letting me know. Like, I didn't know, but because I was constantly putting myself out there in different avenues, it allowed for people to find me without me looking for them. And that can be done whether it's you're a brand or just a person who's looking for work. Putting yourself out there, letting people know this is what you're interested in, reaching out to people actually will keep you in their mind. Like, so if an opportunity comes down the road, they're like, oh, I remember that one person who reached out to me, you just never know. It might not be tomorrow, but just putting yourself out there and engaging. And I know people are introverted. I joke and say I'm an introverted out extrovert because I present as an extrovert, but I really like want to be, don't want to talk and what have you. But I have to do it for people to know who you are. Recently, I came across some introvert pages like on our channels on YouTube, and I was like, this is very interesting. I saw someone, because I get that question a lot, like, well, what if someone is not as extroverted as you and they have a challenge, putting themselves out there? But I've seen introverts, they're not necessarily engaging in the same ways, but they're still putting their content out so that people know who they are. So it's possible to put yourself out there, no matter your personality, no matter your background, just as long as you're putting things out there where people can now be attracted to you and what you have to offer.
Absolutely. And one thing I really liked how you kind of, this is kind of near the end of your book, is you really put a focus on the importance of setting goals. And again, that's something that I've been doing for years now. And it is one of those things where it's like, people maybe make fun of vision boards, but they work, and it's like, that, you make fun of it if you have never tried it, right? And it's one of those things where it's, if you feel like, oh, gosh, this is not where I want to be in life. And believe me, everyone's going to feel like that or has felt like that at some point in their life or career. It's as easy as really sitting down, getting clear on what do you actually want and being honest with yourself. And that can be doing some soul searching and digging deep and getting real. And then really figuring out what are my goals and then your specific action steps. And for me, because I think when we think about, especially making a big pivot, whether it's like I want to do a totally different career than my education, or I'm midway through my degree and I hate it, what do I do? It can seem like the biggest thing. It's almost impossible to digest or to even acknowledge. And so to get really specific and kind of categorize things and just like make things really micro. I mean, that's what helped me, I think, ultimately make the decision to leave my last job in marketing to do, a crazy, scary thing and start my own business where literally no one in my family is an entrepreneur. And so I was told this is a bad idea. It's big. And I appreciate you talked about that in your book. It's like, I got a lot of people saying that's a big risk. Like you may lose all your money. You may never get a job again if you're self-employed for a while and doesn't work out and then no one wants to hire you. All these things. And I did it anyway. But a lot of it had to do with getting clear on what I wanted and then doing A, B, C, and D. Do you want to kind of speak to what are some of the key ways for if someone wants to like maybe make a change or they don't know how to get really precise on how to move forward?
Well, as you mentioned, putting it down, a lot of times people talk about, like I was saying in my book, like people say, oh, I want to do this, or I'm about to do this and I'm about to do that. And they talk about it so much, they don't write it down. It never becomes a reality because they don't put their attention to it. It's just a hope. It's just a wish. But if you actually plan and map out, and of course, there might be pivots and shifts and changes where it might not look exactly, like you had hoped, and it would look like in the end. A lot of times it's actually better once you've accomplished it. But just putting it, what your goal is down, and taking those steps. And like you mentioned, people joke about vision boards like it might be woo-woo, if it's woo-woo, whatever. But the point is, though, you're focused your attention on something. So it gives you the motivation and drive towards it, right? So then you start to say, okay, you know what? This is something that I said that I want. How do I get there? Or how do I take those steps to get there? And it could just be, okay, today I'm going to do this. And you'll notice that things start to unfold after that. You might just go down a rabbit hole of, oh, wow, I didn't know the steps to take to get to this end point, but just starting allowed me to kind of see things start to unfold. So making sure that you have goals that are people say realistic, but I would say push yourself beyond just realistic because you never know, what you can attain. Also making sure that you set a timeline, because a lot of times when we have goals, we're like, oh, I want this, but okay, well, when are you going to want to accomplish that? Is it in a month? Is it in 6 months? 12 months, 2 years? Have like an idea of what it is that you want. And a lot of times when people are saying that it's too risky or, I don't want to make that shift, sometimes where you are now, you can start to make those baby steps. So whether it's, I don't want to quit my job immediately, you can start to save in a way that will allow you to have that cushion or that support, so that when you do decide to resign, that you're not feeling like, oh, I'm gonna be homeless tomorrow. It's taking those steps and mapping them out so it suits you the best, but also keeping in mind sometimes you just have to take that risk and just jump.
No, and also you wrote too, and I think this is so important. This is actually something I think I want to work on today, because we think about, what we want to achieve in the future as a big risk, but we often forget about the risks that we've taken that have paid off. We immediately think of all of our failures, but we rarely think about the things that we did and they worked out, even if they're small, because they do compound. All these small little things can actually add up to a big life change. So I think that's such a key thing too, is taking a look at what have you done in the past that you thought was, oh, that's a bit crazy, or I don't know if this is going to work out, and actually ended on a positive thing, or it was successful, because that will then give you, I think, that evidence that, guess what, sometimes risks actually do work out. I feel like in general, in my life experience, you were more often likely to succeed than fail. But
Right.
often we think, oh, there's a 99% failure rate and a 1% chance that it'll actually work out.
No, exactly. Listen, I'm a big risk taker, and since I've become a mom, though, I've been like, oh, I was a little crazy back then, because I would, just go to foreign countries by myself and do stuff, backpack and all that. But now I've become a little bit more cautious. But I was just telling my husband recently, I was like, you know what? I can do this as a mom. Like, we can do this as a collective. I can see how I can draw from my past experiences and make this work as well in this experience. So yes, you're right. A lot of times we think of things as it's going to fail, or we hear those negative, comments from others because they haven't tried it. So they're like, oh no, most businesses fail in their first year. Okay, but can you tell me the statistics of those that succeed? And can we look at it from that view instead of the negative view? And like I mentioned in the book, as you said, if we look at our past to see what we were successful at, there are so many things that we have tried that did succeed, that kind of paint that picture that we can do it in the future. And I don't know what causes us to kind of shift as we get older. We get a little bit more cautious. But for those who are risk takers, continue. But those who are a little bit too cautious and they're not living the life that they dreamed about, or feel like they're not living fully, there are things that you can look back in your life and see how successfully it ended up, and use that to determine your future as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's obviously so many great tidbits and pieces of advice in your book, Dump Your Degree. Where can people grab a copy of it and also follow you on social media or get in touch with you?
Yes. It's pretty much everywhere you can buy books. Amazon as far as the number one place to buy books, but Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Walmart, what have you, Apple Books. It's also available on my website at ZakiyaAkerele.com, and also on dumpyourdegree.com.
Perfect.
And my social media. My social media is Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are all at Zakiya Akerele.
Amazing. I'm going to follow you on TikTok.
Okay, sure.
I want to see what's going on there.
I need to put some more content out, though.
Oh, me too. Me too. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show and sharing all of your wisdom, especially someone who's not only lived all of this experience, but also you're an educator. So you've seen it from so many different perspectives. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation.
And that was episode 341 of the More Money podcast with Dr. Zakiya Akerele. Make sure to check her out. Here's a few websites you can find her at: dumpyourdegree.com, ZakiyaAkerele.com, and her name is spelled ZakiyaAkerele. I mean, I don't know why I spelled that out. You can probably see that on the app that you're listening to, but hey, I'm just going to spell that out for you. You can also find her on Instagram at Zakiya Akerele as well, but a great place where you can find all of the links, because also she has a TikTok and a Facebook and a LinkedIn and she has a bunch of other resources you're going to want to check out. Check out the show notes for this episode, jessicamorehouse.com/341, jessicamorehouse.com/341, or you can find the show notes for any episode I've ever done on my website at jessicamorehouse.com/podcast. And of course, make sure to grab a copy of her book, Dump Your Degree. And yes, I will be giving away a copy. I'm going to share some information about how to enter to win her book and some other books in just a moment. Here's just a few words I want to share about this season's podcast sponsor. This episode of the More Money Podcast is supported by Desjardins. Do you feel valued at your financial institution? Because Desjardins is on a mission to enrich the lives of Canadians, help build stronger communities, and educate its members so they can confidently reach their financial goals. Not only do they offer one-of-a-kind customer care and offer a variety of financial services to fit your needs, as a cooperative, they put their members first. So if you're looking for an institution that's making an impact, look no further than Desjardins. To learn more about Desjardins and how they're making a difference, visit desjardins.com. All right, first and foremost, if you want to win a copy of her book, Dump Your Degree, all you have to do is you can go to the show notes. There's a link in there, or you can go to jessicamorehouse.com/contest. And once you get to that page, you'll also see I'm giving away a bunch of other books that you will also probably want to enter to win. So I am currently also giving away a copy of Untying the Knot by Kelly LaValle, who was recently on the show, Seen, Heard, and Paid by Alan Henry, The Bogle Effect by Eric Balchunas, and Becoming Superwoman by Nicole Lappin. So make sure to go to jessicamorehouse.com/contest to check out all those books and, see, maybe you'll have some good luck and win one of these copies. Honestly, looking at the numbers, not as many people enter them as you probably suspect, so you actually have a really good chance of winning one of these copies. Speaking of books, because I feel like lately I've been getting a lot of questions about, hey, what are some great book recommendations? Well, if you go to my website, jessicamorehouse.com, and if you go to my favorite things, which is one of the main navigations on there in the main menu, it's a great page. It has all of my favorite things, including books that you should read. And I'm even so nice and organized that I organize these books based off if they're from a UK author, a US author, or Canadian author, in case you want something specific. So make sure to check that out. I also have a bunch of other resources and favorite things listed on the page, including, because I also get lots of questions all the time about this. If you're looking for a fee-only financial planner or an accountant or a bookkeeper or investment coach, whatever, I've got a bunch of them listed on my website. Obviously, they are all Canadian, but check them out. jessicamorehouse.com/favorite-things. And favorite is spelled the Canadian way with a U. Okay, so some other things I'd like to share, just an FYI, because we're getting close to the end of the year. And if you have this on your goals list, well, there's still time to do it. And I'm talking about if you had it on your goals list or your New Year's resolutions to learn about investing this year or do something different with your investments, because maybe they're with the bank and they're in high fee mutual funds, which suck. There's never been a better time than the present to learn what you don't know. So you may want to check out my Wealth Building Blueprint for Canadians course. Obviously, it's just for Canadians. It is about passive investing, so index investing, and all the information you can find on my website, jessicamorehouse.com/course. It is by application only. If you are approved, then you have a call with me so we can discuss if it is a good fit for you. You can ask me any questions you have about the course, but it's if I do say so myself, a pretty damn great course. You can read all the testimonials from past students. And it's not just a course where it's all right, I learned it, now we're done. It really is a community, which is really exciting. There's a very active Facebook group. I do bi-weekly kind of office hours, Zoom call, group call, where you can join in and chat with other people. And we have a great discussion. Lots of great stuff in this course. So you can find more information about that at jessicamorehouse.com/course. And last but not least, a reminder, I do have a second podcast. It is called Clean Slate. It is something that I did over the summer, recorded it in secret in July, which was really exciting, in partnership with CBC and Desjardins. And you can find all the episodes at cbc.ca/clean-slate. Again, it's also just linked in the show notes for this episode, jessicamorehouse.com/341. But it's not just a podcast, it's a video podcast. So you can also see me in action interviewing the guests that I was lucky to interview. So make sure to check that out. And lastly, if that wasn't enough, I've got a bonus episode for you tomorrow, and you're going to definitely want to tune in because we're going to be talking about inflation interest rates, cost of living, and what the heck we can do about it. I know that has been like the topic of the year. So make sure to check back in with a special bonus episode tomorrow. Big shout out to my wonderful podcast editor, Matt Rideout. And with that, have a good rest of your day. See you back here bright and early tomorrow.